everybody. Welcome to the February edition of Scripting the Book. Today, we are going to be talking about Hidden Figures, the book and the movie. And we have our co host, Natalie, is going to be hanging out in the chat with everybody. And for our guest host today, we have Rachel. And of course, my co host, Ben, is here. So I'm going to grab my notebook, which I left all the way out of arm's reach. While I grab my notebook, I'm going to let our guest host, Rachel, introduce herself. And then, Ben, you go ahead and introduce yourself. Go ahead, Rachel.
Thanks. So my name is Rachel. I have a booktube channel called RK Stumblingbear, where I read a lot of science fiction, and I really like learning about the NACA and NASA history, which is one of the reasons why I asked to be on this show. I am currently a judge for the self-published science fiction contest that is going on right now, and we have just started reading the semifinalists. So that is what I do.
Yeah, and I am Ben Pick. I'm on Running2Write, where every Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors. And this book actually had a little bit of tie into my background as well, because I am trained as a mechanical engineer. I don't use that anymore, but a lot of the locations are also right near where I live, more or less, in the greater Virginia area. And so I know a lot of these physical places. So it was really interesting to see. And I always like when a book does reference this, what I went to.
Awesome. And yes, I like it. And Ben, do you want to mention those two little things sitting right beside you?
Oh, yeah, certainly. And I also have two books. Those will be Falling Through, my debut novel, and Expanding Cracks. They're all about a team of what amounts to superheroes going off and fighting giant monsters and threats to the world that come in through a portal to another dimension. So in terms of Hidden Figures, there is a little bit of thought in terms of how some of the physics of the fights take place, but it is nowhere near as complicated as the mathematical formulas that they derived.
Excellent. And I'm Nia the Vixen of Fiction. You are here on my channel, and I am a book lover and writer of sci-fi, fantasy, historical fiction, a little romance, and I like to genre hop. So, and I love history books, even though I am not good at science. Science fascinates me. I don't know anything about the numbers, but watching it all happen, something about it just I just absolutely light up. Don't give me a math equation. It's not going to get solved. But it fascinates me, and it's why sci-fi and historical fiction are two of my favorite genres to read and write in. So let us say hello to some folks in the chat really quick, and then we'll hop right in to our story. Let's see. We have Richard. Hello. That was me saying hi to Richard, and Richard saying hi to me. And Natalie is here hanging out in the chat today. I'm at the coffee shop and it's perfectly fine. We're just glad that you're going to be chatting with us, Natalie. Essie is here. Hello. And Cool Gamer is here. Yes, excellent. I can't wait to. So let's get right into it. The book, Hidden Figures, dislike, neutral, like, and love. Anybody a dislike? Neutral. Like. Love. Yeah. I will start by saying I enjoy reading history books anyway. So if you give me a history book, as long as it, is accurate and, gives me some details, I'm going to be anywhere from a neutral to a love. This one was so well written. I absolutely loved it. It captivates you in a way that you just want to keep reading it. And I was telling Rachel backstage that I listened part of it. I've read it before, so this is like a definite reread for me. But even when I was listening to it at night, my husband goes to bed very early, and I put it on audiobook, and he said he was listening to it. He's like, he fell asleep before they made it to space. So he woke up and asked me, did we make it to space? It's that interesting. My husband does not like history books. So
Mhm.
if you're wondering. So anybody else want to tell why they loved Hidden Figures?
For me, it began at the beginning when Shetterly was putting into context of why she was researching it. It was just having that voice of she made it able where anybody could connect to her writing and the story and just the history, and that made me really get invested, especially when she first talked about Dorothy Vaughan. Like, I just
Yes.
fell in love with Dorothy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as for me, this is going to be a really crude comparison, but the book read a lot like an encyclopedia, which the last book we read was Fire and Blood, and I criticized it for that exact same point. But here it's entirely different because it's an encyclopedia entry of real people who exist in our world, changed science, and moved our country and the world into outer space, and sure, it gave encyclopedia like entries of they were walking down the street and they saw this poster and decided to move to a different part of the state to go to Langley and take up all these jobs as a computer. But those small little details, which again I criticize Fire and Blood for including because they felt extraneous. Here, those small little details matter so much because it allowed us to connect with real people.
Exactly. I totally agree. So let's go ahead and get into it. So when you talk about how those details that these are kind of the facts of what was going on, and then the way that they said, and then Dorothy, and would go into detail about where Dorothy was at this time and how Dorothy's life fit into the things that were happening in the historical lineage kind of, encyclopedia. It kind of it was almost like setting the backdrop, but it was also in the forefront all at the same time, which
Mhm.
Shetterly did such a good job at this. It's like these are the things that were going on in 1948 or whatever year that as she brought us through Dorothy's life, getting her to NASA, from her high school and college and the family life and getting married. All of this, it would always be with this over overshadowing backdrop of this is where we are in history. And
Mhm.
then this is where Dorothy is. This is Dorothy's life at this point in history. And then a little bit also with Catherine and some of the other ladies, but heavily the focus in the book Hidden Figures is on Dorothy Vaughan,
Mhm.
who's just an overall fascinating woman.
Yeah.
Um, anybody else thoughts? Go ahead, Rachel. Yeah, we round robin a lot, so don't worry.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, so I'm very familiar with reading like biographies of dealing with NASA history and NACA history. And what I really enjoyed about this was this did not only focus on that location, as you were talking about, it brought in the bigger world. Like, I had never heard of Randolph and the work that he did to get the civil service opened up to everyone and not just white people. And I thought that was fascinating, and how we needed that history and that context to understand why it was so important then that Dorothy put in an application, and not just her, but all these other women and men as well, and how that was changing the environment at Langley, especially during the war years, and how that completely changed the frame of reference for the people who were working at Langley. So then as things continued, even while our country is battling racism, they they were already like, okay, but these people are mathematicians. They know their job. We're going to continue going this way. And so I loved that Shetterly had weaved in all the historic backdrop of what was going on, because that those items really did influence the lives of the women and men who were working at Langley and were applying and looking for those opportunities.
Totally agree.
Mhm.
And one of the things that stuck out to me as we're reading this part of history, because it wasn't only for NASA, it was for so many things, but the way that she explained how war really opened the door. When all of the men had to go away to war, there were so few men left, how they had to rely on women. They suddenly also had to rely on Black men and Black women and people, Jewish and Irish. You get a sense of, and she included, all of these things were included, so that you could see if it was hard for these people. Just imagine how much harder it was, for these other people. It was already hard for women. Imagine how hard it was for Black women, and it explained it so well, and how we went through history, and then the fear of what's going to happen when the war is over, and then what I mean. All of these things were explained in a way with as a sort of backdrop as we go through Dorothy's life. I just thought it was really well done, because sometimes it's a hard thing for people to understand. They're like, I don't, just if you're good at the job, you can just have the job. And it's like, no, it really wasn't. Just being good at the job didn't mean diddly squat.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
you had to fight for an opening.
I was going to say, you can even see in the tech industry just the past few months, there are extremely qualified people at Amazon and Google, some of whom I know personally, and they laid off 10% of their staff, and now they are going to be relying on less experienced people to fill and backfill and perform those tasks. But they were extremely qualified for the jobs they had. They were the right people for the right job, and even then the company still decided it cost too much to keep them here. So I can't imagine what it was like back then, before the huge tech boom, before they understood the value these people were bringing to the projects they were working on.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I also really liked how Shetterly incorporated the science and the math in this history. Like I said, this isn't my first time reading about this sort of like the subject matter, but I think she did it in a way that makes it very easy for people who are not mathematically inclined, because I'm not. And the only reason why I get all the science behind it is because I've just done enough reading about it. So I like that she's like, this is what you need to know to understand what is going on here. And I'm like, oh, this is perfect.
Absolutely. Totally agree, Essie. Yes. And it's fascinating because even at the parts where they're explaining the numbers, they're doing it in a way that if you're not big into math or big into science, you're still going to get it. And I just thought Shetterly did a brilliant job of doing that. Hello, Eva. Eva's a huge fan of the movie. Never read the book. The book is excellent, Eva. I don't know if you saw the part where we gave our opinions. We were all a love on the book. And we'll get into some of the comparisons of the book versus the movie, so you can see what you're going to get, because you will get more. I will let you know that you will get more from the book. One of the things that I didn't realize was that, I mean, I feel like I knew it, but you don't know it until you really see it. The pay gaps, what these brilliant people had to live on, when the most they could be is a teacher, and they could only be a teacher in the Black schools, and they were making half of what a teacher in the white school was making, and trying to support the family. And you're like, this is probably one of the smartest women in the world. And the best she can get is either working at the laundry, and they broke down what jobs were good, and housekeeping, working in the laundry, moving up to being a teacher, and all the way up to, like the holy grail of being able to work with NASA and NACA. That would just be like it. So when they finally got these jobs, they were just like, we're doing anything, moving away from family, sometimes hundreds of miles, hours and hours away from family, because the in on having these jobs was that important. Not to mention the work that they were doing, but what it meant for society and their community as a whole. I was like, wow, they were really making the sacrifices to make this happen. and I can't remember, but oh yeah, she was a year. This is a year teaching. She was making $800 a year as a teacher versus $2,000 a year at NACA.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
Even like at the end of the book, it talked about Dorothy's retired and someone had come to her door to ask her if she wanted to be on a lawsuit about being paid fairly. And she goes, well, they paid me what they told me they were going to pay me. So
Yeah.
I'm not doing that.
Who doesn't love watching someone live their passion and breaking glass ceilings? Yeah, that was the amazing part. And they talked about things like the sign because NASA and NACA, that was still segregated, but they tried to not be, they tried to keep it segregated to keep the people who wanted it segregated like happy, but all of the women, the women were in one room, Black women were in another room. It's like, they were really like trying to figure things out and try to get all of these people working together without upsetting society as a whole. And you're trying to bring all of these different people with these different beliefs and different backgrounds together. And ultimately, what was important was the numbers, getting the numbers right. The computers being able, and the computers were the women. The women were not. It was before they got the big IBM, which we'll talk about Dorothy Vaughan and that IBM computer. What she did, the woman's brilliant. But so they had them all separated, and the how I can't remember if it was Dorothy or another woman who kept just taking down the sign and
It
and
was
hiding
Mary
it.
Man.
Oh, it's
at,
Mary.
at the lunch table. Yeah.
And it's just like, wow, the things that they would do until finally they just kind of like said whatever and let it go. But they were really worried. They're like, you're going to get us all in trouble if you keep taking down the colors only sign off of the bathroom door, which played out differently in the movie, but we'll talk about that. So it was fascinating to see the gumption of these women, working in like one of the most important places in America at the time. So the history of NASA is also interesting. Oh, good, yes. And the disproportion of teachers and scientists is still true. Very much true. Yeah.
I mean, it was even at the end of the book when Mary Jackson, after she had been engineer, then had gone into the human resources department in order to help other women and minorities. And just they talked about, I don't remember the name of the person that she was working with, but they had to use a computer program to show the unequal pay and how, these men and women, they have the same qualifications, but the women are classified here and the men are classified up here. Before other administrators at NASA was like, oh, wait, that's a problem. Yeah, you think?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Eva says it's not often we see these little rebellions. Yes, we hear about the big ones, exactly. But the little ones, like just taking down the sign every other day or however often she did it, or whenever it would come back up, just take it down, put it in her bag again and again. Not always part of the marketed fiction. This is very true. And Adrian's here. Hello, Adrian, at Books by Adrian. So the other thing I want to talk about, I want to get to, is when the IBM computer comes into play, because that's the computer's job. The computer is all these women working in these two warehouse office buildings. It's their job to, as fast as they can, be thrown any number, any equation. They don't even know a lot of times what the numbers are for. They're just given an equation, told to solve it as fast as they can and get it back down to the guys. And they would do it, and they were mind-blowing how they were able to do all of this. But then when they got the numbers on how fast this massive IBM computer, once it's up and running, what it could do. They're like, there's no way we can do that. But
Mhm.
Dorothy Vaughan is like, we're going to learn how to program these things, and we're going to keep our jobs. This is how we're going to do it. We've got to move with the times. And she did. And I'm like, brilliant. So they were ready. She had her people, these women, ready to go, because especially at this time it would have been easy. It was already after the war. They're in the Cold War, but the men are home. So they could have replaced all these women with men and just like kind of just like taught them how to do the basic programming for the computer. But she had with the women ready to go, which brilliant, and learn this IBM computer, this new machinery inside and out.
And that's incredible foresight. It's the only equivalent I can think of is people who kind of saw, the internet of the mid 90s and saw what it could be. Whereas a lot of people were saying, oh, it's just a fad, it's limited, this, that, and the other. But Dorothy saw what a computer, what a electronic computer could be versus what a human computer could be. And so she decided to learn exactly how to use it, like you said. And that is just more proof that she is incredibly brilliant.
Absolutely. Let's see, where do we want to go?
And
All
I
right.
think it's actually a mindset that you see in a lot of the employees here, that they really did look for those further opportunities to educate themselves because they were passionate about what they're doing. And it made me even look at my life. I'm like, do I want to go back to school? Is there more, what am I passionate about in my job? So that kind of had me doing a reflection.
And
Yes.
I was just going to say, and that's another thing too, is that they didn't have books or anything to study back then. All they had were the user manuals for those IBM computers, and maybe one single textbook. They don't have volumes and volumes to sort of take in all this information and understand exactly what to do with it. So they were basically making the books that we would all eventually read.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of times the women weren't even allowed to get credit on these things. The credit went to whoever the men. And this is for all the women, the white women and the black women. The credit went to the men who were their bosses or ahead of them. And it's like, oh, how many things that have happened do we not know who actually is behind making it happen? Because only the person in charge gets their name on it. It's like, there's so much to uncover. Natalie says, that killed me. They wrote it, but their name couldn't be on the paper. Yeah. Super frustrating.
I know, they just kept thinking about, oh, well, they obviously don't want the credit, really. They did the work, but they don't want the credit for what they did. Are you guys sure about this?
I mean, yeah, you're the boss, put your name on the top, but make sure their name's in there. And on occasion, they would get like in some little side note, and the computers. It's like, thanks a lot. I know this is horrible, but sometimes. But look how far we've come. This is true. We still have a little ways to go, but yeah, we're far leaps and bounds from that, for sure. Let's go ahead and get into the movie so that we can start making some comparisons after we talk about the movie. Any dislikes, neutral, like, or love on the movie? Dislike? Neutral on the movie? Like on the movie? Love on the movie? And I'm a like to love on the movie. So I thought it was great. More of a love. The reason why it's a like to love for me on the movie is because probably honestly wanted more. The book, we get a lot of Dorothy, and then in the movie we get a lot of Catherine, but I feel like there's so much more of Marion and some of the other women that I'm like, I honestly they all should have their own movie. They probably all could have their own movie. So me
Or they could
wanting
even like redo this as a mini-series and then give us more background.
Yes. So the only reason why it's not a love for me is that I honestly, when you read the book, you honestly want more.
Yep.
It could be a mini series for sure. Anybody else want to say why they're a like or a love on this one?
I think for me, I fell more on a like, and this has nothing to do with the actual book. This is like specifically just the movie. And that's because of the arc at the end where with Jonglin, and like all of this is true. He did, there was that indicator light that had gone off. And so they told him to keep the retro rockets on. But in the movie, they built it up so much. And like even like the musical score made me start thinking, oh, Apollo 13. And I'm just like, okay, guys, the focus isn't supposed to be on that. It's supposed to be on these women. And so that's why I went from love to like, because when we get that little bit of a shift at the end, I was like, nope, let's go back to the women.
Yeah, they did Hollywood that up for sure.
I will say that was one of my odd changes that we'll get to later, but where they chose to end the movie did feel off and rushed a little bit. But in terms of love, and this comes as a huge compliment because I know technically it was snubbed at the Oscars, but I really, in general, do not enjoy watching the Oscar winners or Oscar nominated movies, etc. And this was just such a stunningly human story that it kept me on the edge of my seat the entire way. And I'd already read the book, so I know exactly what's going to happen. I know exactly what's going to happen with the space race. I know exactly what's going to happen from a historical standpoint. But just the human story of it was something I had never known what went on to get us to that point.
Right.
Yeah. I
and
think
they were
also
fantastically acted. Sorry.
Oh yeah, the acting was great. The acting was great.
Okay.
I think one of the things, and it's what they do to Hollywood it up. Also, I think it could be a little hard for some people to watch if they're watching all of the white people being bad all the time. So just kind of putting a lot more spotlight on fictional characters doing great things. When I like with the sign, I feel like I would have liked for them to find a way for the sign to have been done by one of the Black characters, and find some other ways to show that, because there were a lot of people on their side, like, we're all in this together, let's just work together. There were a lot of people who thought that way, but there were also a lot of people who like with the coffee pot, you know, like absolutely not. So there were things that were hard to watch, but this is just, it's the way it was. So, go ahead and show it. But I feel like they did play up the John Glenn parts a little bit. But when we get to comparisons, I'll give my theory on why I think that they did that. I feel like there's a reason that they played up some of these characters.
Agreed. I also found it interesting, especially as I was rereading the book, that when you're reading the book and it's giving you the names of the people they worked with, none of those are the names of the white characters in the movies. So they gave all the white characters like just different names, and they're more like an amalgamation of all the white people you meet in the book. So I thought that was an interesting choice.
Yeah. I feel like it was probably a good choice, just because then we'd have 3 bosses instead of the one Al Harrison. We'd have 3 people that he would report to, and 3 more characters taking away from, our main character. So I don't feel like, I feel like I understand why they comprised some of these characters into one. The same thing with Dorothy's supervisor. She was comprised into one character. The women, or the men that Catherine was working with, the one who sat across from her, he was also several characters, because they said they wouldn't know exactly which one was which, and it's just easier to generalize and make him just, here's the character, he's 4 or 5 different guys.
Yeah.
So for casting purposes, I understand it.
Yes.
And to help not take away from Catherine and Dorothy and Mary.
Yeah. Well, I just thought it was interesting that like John Glenn, and then you had James Webb, but then everybody else is a made up name, which I was surprised, because you could have had someone named Chris Kraft. That's a pretty well known name.
Mhm.
setting up mission control, and then nope, they didn't even use his name. I was like, oh, okay, this is an interesting choice. So yeah, but I mean, at the same time, it does keep things focused on our three main women.
Yeah. But yeah, and I feel like probably if they'd have used one actual person's name, but still tried to make it like 3 or 4 different people, it would have confused their history. Because then people would be going back and say, "Well, he didn't do this, he didn't do that. Was this other," and so I feel like they just did it to just make it easier and to say, "Look, it's several people that she worked with, several people that were bosses that she worked under, and then you can, I guess, if you're like me, just do the research and find out who was this and who was that, and then okay, they took this from this person and that from that person." But I know a lot of people are just trying to watch a movie and they're not gonna, be trying to look up and find out who did she work for, who were all her bosses. There were things that I just really enjoyed, like just seeing the wind tunnels and Mary in the wind tunnels, and it's just
Mhm.
blowing. I'm like, there were parts that were just great, and it's just like this is what it would have been like. So I'm that girl who just loves to see what it would have been like to be there at that time. So
Right.
there were so many fun parts to watch.
And that is something I think the movie really shines on was, I mean, they took a slice of the book and it said, this is what was happening. So
Hmm. So what did you guys think of the world building and the way that they executed the story in the 2 hours and 7 minutes that we get?
I thought it was really wonderful. I thought it, like you said, it's just a tiny slice of what the book actually conveyed, but it did a really good job of getting us in there, showing us what it was like back then in the post World War II and the prime of the Cold War era.
mhm.
So we got to sort of, that's a place where a lot of people don't necessarily know, or especially people my age don't necessarily know exactly what it was like. Exactly, we have kind of a piecewise knowledge of that, but it just brought us in there so quickly and showed us what it was like to live then.
Right.
Hmm. Yeah, probably why they did it. Yep. Ah, yes.
And I think
I
that's
was
probably
like,
also because, in history class, at least I know my history class, right as we got to the Cold War, school ended.
Hmm.
So we didn't really actually
We didn't get to the
study
Cold
any
War.
of it. So
yeah.
I don't think we even got past World War II.
Yeah, we barely got past it, and I'm a little bit older than you and probably a little older than you, and so I'm thinking, "This is where we're stopping at. It's only gonna get worse as time goes on," and sure enough, my kids are like, "Yeah, we needed a whole another history class."
yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, there's not enough time, to get through," or they focus on things that maybe they shouldn't have focused on, because then you go to college and learn different things, and you're like, "Oh, oh, that's not how we learned that." You could have skipped that and moved on to some other more important things. Um, let's see. I started thinking about the ways I would have turned the book into a film and TV series. Yeah, you do start thinking about that. Um, do we want to talk in it? Because I want to get into that a little bit. Do we have anything else to say on world building and execution? Um, Because what my thoughts on the world building and execution, I love when these movies like this do a good job of taking us back to that period in time. It's a little bit different from a fictional sci-fi or fantasy where they're creating the whole world. In this case, they're taking us back to the actual sites, or they're recreating the sites exactly how they were, and you get to see what the campuses were like when Catherine is running across the campus and you see the shiny new buildings, and then as she's running you get to where the older buildings, and just really being able to feel like we're running across this campus. It's going to take like 30 minutes to get from point A to point B for her to go use the bathroom. And like I said, I loved the wind tunnels. I loved seeing the room with the IBM computer and them
Mm.
trying to cut out the wall to get the thing in there. And just seeing what the computer was like. How I'm like, oh my gosh, this this is the way it used to have to be. So all of these things just absolutely fascinate me. And when they can make it real and make it seem like this is actually what it was like, I just absolutely love that, because you feel like you're taking a step back into in time and getting to live that. And I'm a very immersive reader and watcher, so things like that just chef's kiss for me.
And I was going to say, that's why that hook, the very first scene, brought us into the world so perfectly, because the cop pulls them over and everyone's terrified, or sorry, they're already pulled over because there's car trouble, and the cop comes over and he's about to give them like a huge issue. He's about to give them tickets. He's about to just threaten them, whatever. And then that whole demeanor changes when they say, yeah, we work at NACA, we got to go, can you help us out? And then what's the, not chauffeur, he just leads them to escort. Thank you. He escorts them to work. So that entire demeanor just completely 180s, which was fascinating to bring us into the world itself.
Yeah. And it also lets you see, especially with Marion, because these are her real thoughts, and she starts to say her real thoughts, and the other girls are like, button it up before you get us in real trouble. And you see them, yes, sir. And they use their really soft code switching voices. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And really politen it up to try to ease the tensions. And then, you see the whole, this is who we work for. And just, he's like, oh, different attitude comes abound, and they get that escort. So it lets you see how they have to navigate in society just to survive and get by.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts on world building and execution before we get into our comparisons? All right. So let's do best and worst changes, and also they can be your neutral changes as well. For me, the neutral change would be the compressing of the characters, the white characters, because there would be so many, compressing them into single characters. I think that was fine. It didn't bother me, except for that, in the sense of it makes one character seem like they're possibly better than what they were necessarily. Because they allowed things to go on that we would think, I can't believe she's working in your office and you're allowing this to go on. But of course it was the times. So with the segregation and the way that people are looked at when you walk into the office or touch the coffee pot, or getting fussed at for going to the bathroom, that's a change that was brilliantly done. There's so many changes. So the bathroom situation, they said it actually happened with Mary, not with Catherine, but it was Taraji P. Henson just did a great job with that scene. Like, it broke my heart. It just, seeing her, is like, I had to relieve myself, and this is what I have to do. I can't even drink from the coffee pot. Like, that whole scene. Oh, we lost Ben really quick. Hopefully he'll be back. So that whole scene just kind of like, it's a gut punch, but in a way that the delivery was great. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, and I think that was something also, like you in the book they showed how like Mary handled it. By somebody approached her and she just kind of vented, and they were like, that scientist was like, oh, well, come work for me instead. Whereas they talked about Catherine, her way of solving it is she ignored the sign or the lack of it. She was just like, whatever, I'm gonna go use it. So in real life, she handled the situation differently, but they needed that dramatic moment for the movie, and it made sense how they did it. Like you, though, I was sad that the sign came down because of Harris. I forget
Al Harrison.
Yeah. So I was sad that he was the one who took the sign down instead of it coming down by other means. But again, I understand in the storytelling context why it happened that way.
Yeah. And I feel like if I could have done it better and still let him kind of be that a little bit of a hero, maybe have him maybe go there and see one of the women taking the sign down and just being like, it's down now, it's not going back up. Use what, be the, because they did say eventually once it went down, then they just used whatever bathroom. It was just odd the way that things were like, well, I guess this is what we're doing now. And, but if they needed him in that kind of hero role to be the one to announce, look, the sign's down, it's not going back up, use whatever bathroom. But yeah, but the drama of him hammering it down after she gives the heart-wrenching speech about how she has to, basically work harder than everybody else to get everything done, just to use the bathroom, that seems very touching. It's emotional, it's heartwarming. So it does what it needs to do. And I feel like him taking it down is kind of like, it's saying, look, who are you going to be? Are you going to be the good guy or are you going to be the bad guy? Whose side are you going to be on? But still, I just wish that it had been able to be one of the Black women to take the sign down, because they're the ones that took the sign down.
Yeah. I think another change, I'm not sure if I would consider it good or bad, because I can see why they did it for the movie. But in the book, Levi Jackson always supported his wife, Mary. And so when she wanted to go to college and had to petition to go to the all-white school to take those college classes, he was behind her all the way. And in the movie, they have some tension between them at first about it, where he's like, well, you're a woman, you're supposed to be at home with the kids. And I understand why they did that, because other people in society would have been looking at that. But I really love how in the book it even talked about their grandchildren. Like, we loved it because he ended up he was a painter working at NASA at the end of his career, and she was an engineer at NASA. So they talked about he painted the wind tunnels, and then their mom, and then she used them, and just how they worked together as a partnership in marriage and family, and then also in their careers worked in tandem as well.
Mm-hmm. Let me go back to some questions real quick, and then we'll finish talking about some more of the differences. Natalie said, the world was great, and I always loved the cars. The opening scenes of the cop was, yes, agree, showed the mindset of society and outshine the prejudice of society that outshine the prejudice of the time. Yes. And I didn't get much past World War II in my history classes either. Yeah. And typical government procurement, forgetting to check if stuff fits before delivery. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, military kid here. So yep, absolutely. Yeah, this was an example of a good gut punch. Yes, the speech given by Catherine. Oh my goodness. And then Harrison taking the sign down was both satisfying and a bit annoying that it wasn't done by Catherine or one of the other Black characters. Totally agree. Anybody else have any thoughts on some of the changes that were made?
I know another change that I noticed is they aged the families down. So like all the kids were a lot younger than they really were at this time period. And I thought that was an interesting choice, because I think it's a different dynamic between a working mother and a younger child, and a working mother and a teenager, or with children who are in college. So
yeah, I agree. But the kids were cute though. And I think that's part of it.
That's it's a lot easier. So they focused on their jobs, and then everything else sort of fell by the wayside. Like, I felt that the relationships with their husbands were kind of some of the weakest parts of the movie. And by having them be kids, they can just sort of streamline it. Like, oh, hey, these are, cute kids. That's all we really need to show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we know why they put the cute kids there.
Yeah.
Which, in reality, these women, they worked a lot of hours, but then they also did a lot in the community on top of that. Like,
Yes.
they talked about, like, Mary Jackson, like, she was a Girl Scout troop leader, before her daughter could have been in Girl Scouts, and then afterwards, going through a lot of changes. because she wanted to lift other girls up. So
yeah, they aged. One of the women, was it Catherine? Oh yeah, I believe it was probably Catherine. But one of them had older children and then had 2 more younger children. But there would have been the older children as well.
that was Dorothy.
Dorothy.
And
Sorry,
then actually, Mary, her son, was a teenager when her daughter was like, I think 4, when they talked about the car derby race.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And the other thing that was a change that I get the nod, and that was kind of the John Glenn scenes. So you see when we first, I think it's when we first meet John Glenn, and he's going and he's shaking the hands of all of the computers and the mathematicians and the engineers. And then the black computers there's a big gap between them, I guess, where he's supposed to just turn and just walk right by them. And instead he goes across and he starts shaking all of their hands. So in the book, what it said is that it's rumored that the astronauts were on their side of desegregation. But no one ever outwardly came out and said anything. So it's like behind the scenes kind of acknowledgments and things like that were going on that led them to believe, oh, they're with us. They're with us. They're just finding those silent ways to move silently to get things done. So I think that the addition, the kind of like bumping up of John Glenn in these ways was kind of like a way of showing that he's not saying, hey, I'm with the desegregating all of these things, but he's extending the hand. So I felt like that's where they were going with that. So that we could see, hey, the rumor was that the astronauts were on the side of desegregation and on their side. So we're going to find a way in the movie to show that. And he did say, run the numbers by the girl. I trust her. John Glenn actually did say that when the computer's numbers were coming up different. He's like, I don't know why. The computer can't explain why the numbers were one thing yesterday and the numbers are something else today. But and we get more of this in the movie. This is that climax, that build up. So we're getting more of this in the movie. Where in the book we got more of just the history of how things were going. But he did say he trusted the girl. Give the numbers to her. If she says that they're good, then we're good.
Yep.
All right, let me check. Anybody else have any changes that they liked, didn't like, or just changes that they noticed?
Yeah, and I mentioned this before, but I would just say it's neutral because I felt like it was such a weird place to end the movie. There was the they could have gone through to the landing on the moon and show how they help with those calculations as well. There were a lot of different and I was actually thinking about this in preparation for today about how I would have done it differently, but I couldn't come up with another way of doing that, which would have the same emotional arc and still keep it contained to about the same amount of runtime. So if they did go all the way out to landing on the moon, then I don't know how it would have worked. But it just did feel like an odd place to end the movie, which is why I say it's like a neutral change.
Yeah.
And then do everything sort of rush at the end of like these little tags of, Dorothy went on to do this, Catherine went on to do this, that, and the other.
Yeah. Am I the only one who reads those? Like, I read them and I pause them just because I need to know. I'm like, where are they now? Are they still alive? What's going on? I love reading.
Not the only one.
I love reading those like end cards and seeing the pictures of what they were like when they were young, what they were like when they were older, and seeing the actor that portrays. Like, I love all of that stuff. I did want to let me make sure I got all of the comments.
I know when I first watched this movie, when it first came out, I was disappointed that the movie was more focused on Catherine. Now, having watched the movie several times and rereading the book, I understand Catherine became a very visible person in NASA during this time. Like, they even talk about, like, after John Glenn's flight, she had her photo in some magazines, had interviews done. And that made sense then why they chose her to be like the focus of the movie. But really, when you read the book, you get a lot more of Dorothy Vaughan. And then you get all the other computers as they go along. But I always have felt more connected to Dorothy because of the book.
Yeah, this is true. And so I know that we've talked about how could we get more. I'm wondering if adding 20 minutes would have made it feel too long at that point, because you are getting a lot of history. And it probably then going to the moon might have still felt like a rushed ending. You know what I mean? Because it's such a climactic thing to happen, to be like, okay, that's it. So I don't know if it's how I don't know how extending it would work, because to get an extra 20 minutes would get you to the moon, but then would you need another 20 minutes to kind of decompress? And so I'm not sure, but I feel like you were saying, Rachel, a mini series would have worked. And I feel like I would still watch a mini series, especially if we now switch the focus to Catherine, or to Marion. That way we had Dorothy focused on the book, Catherine focused on the movie, and now move on to our other character.
Yeah.
As we do, and because we can still get the characters that we fell in love with, as we go. So I'm like, I'd be down. I would watch it if they did a mini series that focused on some of the other computers' lives, and gave us a little bit more. And I think then you could separate some of these characters, some of the bosses and the managers and whatnot that were compressed into one character. I think you could separate it out if you did a mini series that gave you a little bit more time and not take the focus away from the main characters in the 2 hours. So much as we've done this cartoon book, I love miniseries the most, and then full shows with multiple seasons. Oh, well, Natalie, we're going to talk in the IG after this. Ben and I talked a little bit. So speaking of miniseries and series, I would totally watch a miniseries based on the book. Yeah, I would totally do that as well. All right, so let us go to our final thoughts on Hidden Figures. And is there anything that you want anyone to know about the book or the movie before we go?
Yeah, I have a Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead. Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
no. Go. Mine are just random. Don't worry about me. Rachel, it's all you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I love the book, and it's definitely my type of history. And I really, really enjoy the movie. And I think that we need more of these stories out in the public.
Sorry, I just had, since Natalie's not here, I had my two random thoughts from the book. I don't have it recorded in my notes whether this is from the book or the movie, but they mentioned how there was a blazing 1 kilobyte of data that the electronic computer was able to perform. So it was able to, now we have gigs and gigs of data, but just at that moment, it was blazing fast with 1 kilobyte. And then again, even back then, no one knew what a electronic computer was. And so I didn't necessarily take it as them not measuring the door width or whatever. It was just the fact that they didn't understand how big the electronic computers were. They vastly underestimated it. So then they needed to, sledgehammer it through. So it wasn't necessarily it wasn't just whatever comment you made earlier. It wasn't necessarily a governmental issue. It was more just they didn't understand what a computer was.
What they were getting. They didn't realize what they were getting. It's not going to walk through the door. It's not a person. It's this big, huge machine.
Warehouse size. Yeah. And yeah, like I said, I love the book, love the movie. This is... Yeah, this plays right into the realm of my interests and just a blind spot I have for U.S. history around this time. So it was kind of everything that I wanted and a little bit of what I know about.
Yeah, I love this part of history as well, especially this part of it more so than what was going on with communism and all of that stuff. Just the elevation of what we wanted to be capable of, just the expansion of our capabilities with computers and electronics, and what we did with flight, and just how fast it happened once we got in the air. You know what I mean? And just it's like this snowball. It fascinates me how far we went in 100 years.
Yeah.
It's just mind-boggling. And then since computers have come along, how far we've gone from there. And then what motivated that? A lot of that was motivated by ego, but a lot of it was motivated by fear. There was a lot of fear, and wanting to be first was another motivator. Wanting to be first, wanting to be the best. So all of these things fascinate me. I don't say I don't like the cyclicalness of history, sadly. Some of it's not cool that I'm like, oh, we've already gone through this. Here we go again. So not that it's fun, but it is fascinating to see a lot of people who are really into history, and we see things happening again. We're like, we've been on this. It's a roller coaster. We've been here before. And here we go again. And now it was computers then. And now we've, especially like on the topics of things like AI and other advancements with technology, I don't know where it stops. So it's like, it's just fascinating. And this is a part of it. So, looking at how they handled it then, and seeing how we handled it as the internet came along, like Ben said, when the internet came along, everyone's like, it's not going to be, and now, look at it. And then moving on to the next and the next and the next, and it's coming faster and faster and faster. It's all just totally fascinating. Long way of saying that I really enjoyed it, and definitely if you like any of these things, it's definitely worth the read. If you are interested in history, Black history, U.S. history, science. If you're interested in science fiction, these are the real things that a lot of that science fiction is based on, and there's so many other things. Like, I think if we get a miniseries, like, I didn't know the history of Nichelle Nichols in Star Trek, how she was going to quit Star Trek and she was asked not to, and, she ended up helping recruit more women and Black women into NASA, which is a whole other thing. So, like, it's all so fascinating to me. So definitely worth looking into.
Yes, our country definitely still has a big interest in spaceflight, real or imagined.
We do. Like, I'm here. Great story, and it's helpful to watch the movie before reading the book due to the number of characters.
Yep.
Very good. Very good. All right. So, thank you guys. Oh, any other final thoughts before we do our outros and talk about what's coming up? All right. Well, what we have coming up is a little bit of an itinerary. We've got Artemis Fowl coming in March. We're reading an Irish author. And then in April, we're going to take on Bullet Train. We've got Crazy Rich Asians coming up. June is to be announced. We're between a couple of things. We got to talk to Natalie first. And then July and August, this is the one you've really got to prepare for, because Game of Thrones is a lot of books. It's a lot of seasons. So start now. But we're going to tackle Game of Thrones. And it's funny because I have not read it, and I said I wasn't going to read it until we got the final book because I don't like to be left hanging, but I'm going to do it for this. And I
don't think that final book is going to get there.
I don't think it is either. So I'm just going to end up left hanging like everybody else.
And do you want to elaborate on which Game of Thrones we're reading up to for both July and August? Because I thought we were kind of correlated to the series itself.
Yeah. Do you want to? So book. I don't remember which books. 1 through 4 for season. What season's been? Do you know?
Oh boy, not off the top of my head. But yeah, we can come at. So when my point is that when it says Game of Thrones, we're talking about like multiple books and multiple series. So we can let you all know when that happens.
Yeah, we're gonna try and split it up and do the best we can with it. Like, and it's one of those things, if you don't get through watching the whole thing or reading the whole thing, it's fine. We'll talk about what parts we have watched and what parts we have read. Because like I said, I haven't read any of it, so it's going to be a lot of reading for me. So I'm going to get through as much of it as I can. But I have watched the show before, so it'll be like rewatching and spot watching to make sure, okay, I remember what happened here. I remember these characters. So however you guys want to do that is fine. We're just going to talk about it. But we're going to split up basically the first half in July and then the second half in August. And then we can lament over not having a book 8. That'll be the plan. All right. So let me go ahead and let my co-hosts and our guest hosts do their outros. Rachel, you're our guest. Do you want to go ahead and do your outro first?
Sure. Again, my name is Rachel. My channel is RK Stumblingbear, where I read science fiction. I currently have some book reviews for quarterfinalists coming out for some self-published science fiction. And then I usually do like a weekly wrap-up where I talk about what I have finished reading and what I am currently reading and am expecting to pick up. So that's usually what I have on my channel.
Awesome. Ben?
Yeah, I'm Ben Pick, Writing to Write, Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I usually do give questionable writing advice through running metaphors, but I also stray off into whatever random thing I'm thinking of. I just recorded an episode on tropes I don't like, tropes I do like, and that will come out, I don't know, a couple months from now. So it's yeah. I try and give writing advice. I'm a newly published author, and I try and chronicle my journey, but I also go off on tangents.
Tangents are fun. We don't mind. And I'm Nia the Vixen of Fiction. You're here on my channel. Adrian, we're going to hit you up. Don't worry. We specifically had you in mind. I know, right? Bloody season 8. Yes. I don't see it happening. All right. And this is good to know. Seasons 1 through 4 are almost direct adaptations of the book. Good to know. I'm excited. I'm excited to read it, even though there's no book 8. So here we go. Yes. All right. I host this show with Ben and Natalie, and we occasionally will have guest hosts on. So scripting the book every month. And I also host Author Tubers React. So we'll be doing that on Saturday. We're going to talk about all kinds of things that are happening in the writish and bookish community. So come join us, hang out, we chat, we have fun. Yeah, that's what I do. And I write stuff. I'm trying to write things. I'm trying to be like Ben and get published, you know. I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Can't wait.
Yeah. So come join me on the journey. Everybody's linked below, and stay tuned for more every month. We've got something coming every month. Let me find my thing so that we can say goodbye and not have to wave forever. All right. Say bye, guys. Bye.